Sri Lanka has rolled out the red carpet for Prime Minister Narendra Modi with 6 ministers, including Foreign Minister Vijita Herath, turning out to receive him at the Bandar International Airport. India and Sri Lanka are set to unveil measures to bolster the cooperation in the areas ranging from digitization to energy and defense at a meeting between Prime Minister Narendra Modi and President Anura Kumara Dissanayake. As New Delhi continues its support for the island nation's economic recovery, other key expected outcomes including an agreement to link the electricity grids of the two countries and a tripartite understanding between India, Sri Lanka and the United Arab Emirates to build an energy hub in the continues. Project will dovetail with the plans to build an energy pipeline. This marks his first visit to Sri Lanka since the National People's Power Alliance led by President Anura Kumara Dissanayake came to power last year. The 3-day trip is expected to deepen the bilateral cooperation across the regions of defense, energy, health, trade and digital infrastructure. During this visit, Prime Minister Narendra Modi will be carrying forward India's initiative to help Sri Lanka rebuild after the 2022 economic crisis battered the island nation. All right, viewers. Now, in fact, when we are speaking about the crisis that Sri Lanka had in the last 3 years had to cope up from, let's understand how India became a good neighbor and stepped up to help Sri Lanka during the time of need. In fact, when we look at these pictures, what the financial aid constitutes the larger chunk. The financial aid of $3.5 billion was granted to Sri Lanka, and exactly that is how the coping up with the loss that it suffered during that time happened. Another important help that India lent as a good neighbor during the times of crisis is $500 million for the purchase of petroleum products from India. $500 million was a huge amount that India led to Sri Lanka, and these are some of the only some of the only measures that India during the time of the crisis offered Sri Lanka. The line of credit for Sri Lanka was then in fact priced at 65,000 MT urea. That was the line of credit for Sri Lanka during that crisis, and it was also in addition to all the other financial aid that India was already offering to Sri Lanka. 26 tons of drugs and medical supplies have been sent to Sri Lanka during the time of April to May. 26 tons of the medical infrastructure that was required for the basic amenities, and while the island nation was grappling with the financial loss. That was the amount that Indian side had fixed upon to understand that this is the aid that a nation as a good neighbor will be then banking on. When we in fact go further as to what were the big steps of the India-Sri Lanka relations that further enhanced, the consignment of kerosene for the use of fishermen in the northern parts of Sri Lanka was also sent. Apart from the basic amenities, the consignment for the kerosene for the use of the fishermen in the tanks in their own ships for the North Sri Lankan side was sent. Then custom-made dry rations among the fishermen communities in 4th district, 4 districts of North Sri Lanka were also sent. Then apart from the medical supplies and all the other credit and the kind of financial aid, the dry rations have also been distributed in large 4 districts of Sri Lanka. Remember, it shares a very porous border with India, and custom-made dry rations for eastern, southern, western provinces of Sri Lanka were also then sent by the Indian side. The rations during a time of economic loss continues to be always the most important priority for the civilians, and India did a job of a good neighbor to in fact enhance the relationship during the time it was grappling through a lot of financial loss. Now viewers, in fact on that note, let's also keep a look at what is the key crucial significance for the visit that has taken place at this point of time. And to understand that, I have Devnath, Group Captain UK Devnath, who is a defense expert, joining me this morning, along with Colonel J.S. Sodhi, who is a defense affairs expert as well, joining me this morning. Appreciate you both joining me on the broadcast. Thank you very much for joining us. I would like to start with the Group Captain UK Devnath. Sir, appreciate your presence. At this point of time, what the world is looking at, that Prime Minister Narendra Modi's visit to Sri Lanka is aimed at enhancing the bilateral relations and specifically defense relations. But how India in fact also roped in as a good neighbor during 2022 and helped Sri Lanka reel through that loss also does count in. So, when the bilateral talks are expected to take place, is there a sense of in fact good relations that have been developed over the time since 2022 between India and relations that are also expected to have a larger chunk of influence from the Indian side?
Oh yes, Simran, relationship between India and Sri Lanka have seen their ups and downs. Good thing is that after a long time, India has given a very positive vibe to Sri Lanka. As last time during 2022, when India almost pumped in $3.5 billion worth of financial aid to Sri Lanka to help it recoup from its economic and financial turmoil. It has to be seen that Sri Lanka is located geographically in a very strategic position in the middle of Indian Ocean. China is very keen to influence and grab in power indirectly on Sri Lanka. Sri Lanka has offered China a very vital key port in Hambantota, and probably in decades to come, Hambantota will remain a joint venture between Sri Lanka and China. India expects that Sri Lanka will not permit any Chinese naval activity from Hambantota. That remains a very crucial part of relations between India and Sri Lanka. But other than this, a relation between Sri Lanka and India are going to take off very soon. We are going to sign ETCA, that is Economic and Technical Cooperation Agreement with them, under which both countries will share financial resources, banking services, soft loans, and most important, key technical knowledge will be exchanged. As far as energy is concerned, both the countries want to help each other. India wants to make, share, and probably operationalize a joint electrical grid. It will take some time because international protocols are there. Uh, Other than this, Maldives relation with Sri Lanka are very close. So one way of influencing Maldives is through Sri Lanka. Our relations with Bangladesh also have seen their ups and downs. Sri Lanka and Bangladesh are also very
Well,
close
all right,
friends.
UK
So
Group Captain UK Devnath, I would request you to kindly stay on with us, and thank you very much for adding these details. I will definitely come back to you, but right now what we are tracking, and as you can see on your screens, viewers, the Prime Minister Narendra Modi has arrived at the Independence Square, and these are the live shots that you can see, in fact, on your screens. This is just ahead of the ceremonial honor, and that is being accorded to Prime Minister Narendra Modi. And my colleague Megha Sharma continues to be with us on the broadcast from Colombo, where she's tracking all the key updates and developments as Prime Minister Narendra Modi arrives to hold the bilateral talks. Well, viewers, these are the live shots. As one can see, the ceremonial welcome guard of honor is being given. Viewers, as you can see, in fact, these are the live visuals that we're tracking, and NewsX is showing you direct from Colombo. Prime Minister Narendra Modi is in Sri Lanka, and in fact, much anticipated defense bilateral talks. Grand welcome for Prime Minister Narendra Modi is being witnessed. PM Modi and Sri Lankan President are expected to also sign key MOUs, while cultural shows to honor Prime Minister Narendra Modi have been performed after he received the grand ceremonial welcome in Colombo. In fact, now focus will be on the key agreements that are going to be in fact, spotlight. Now, joining me live on the broadcast is Professor Madhav Nalapad. Sir, very good morning and appreciate you joining me this morning. This crucial visit to Sri Lanka does marks Prime Minister Narendra Modi's first engagement with Sri Lankan President after he assumed the office, and this is in fact being looked at very strategically as to what the bilateral ties between India and Sri Lanka are going to look like in the future. Your thoughts?
Look, the fact of the situation is that Sri Lanka is a very important neighbor of India, and it's a country with ancient civilization. Both the Sinhala as well as the Tamil civilizations are very ancient, and you have a very proud Buddhist community in Sri Lanka, which is frankly known all across the Buddhist world for its depth of knowledge and understanding. So it's a very, very important country. And as far as India is concerned, there has been some distance by some Sri Lankan governments with India. But the reality is that this visit, I think, is intended to reset ties with the new administration. And Anurag Dissanayake, President Dissanayake, this grand welcome, all the other gestures of friendship, it shows that he is warm and receptive to close friendly relations with India. So I think that's very important, because the fact of the matter is security is paramount, and security is for the whole of South Asia. And as far as Sri Lanka is concerned, India and Sri Lanka are linked together in so many common bonds, including the economy, the culture, people-to-people connect, and security. So this is a very important trip, and Prime Minister Modi is using his personal diplomacy. Modi diplomacy is what people call it, and he's using that to reset ties, and I think he will find the new president quite open to that. So altogether, it promises to be a very warm visit, and I think it's a very grand gesture on the part of Prime Minister Modi to be the first world leader to visit Sri Lanka. Just as the President Dissanayake, the first country he visited was India, the first important world leader to call on Sri Lanka will be Prime Minister Modi.
Well, definitely, Professor Madhav Nalapad, thank you very much for shedding light on how significant this is for both the nations. Remember, viewers, China's growing military influence on Sri Lanka could be seen as another reason for India's renewed efforts to strengthen ties with Colombo. Now, when we talk about the MOUs and the key MOUs that are expected, which have been a part of the joint vision which was established during the visit by Sri Lankan President Anurag Dissanayake to New Delhi 3 months ago, the MOU on defense cooperation is set to signal a major upward trajectory in India-Sri Lanka defense ties, leaving behind the bitter chapter relating to India pulling out the Indian peacekeeping force, that's the IPKF, from the island nation around 35 years ago. Now, on that note, I have Group Captain UK Devnath with me. Sir, appreciate your patience on the broadcast and thank you for being with us and staying here. Now, when we're talking about the MOUs, if the MOUs on defense will be signed, this is going to be a very strategic and very important step in enhancing the defense ties of both the nations. It is also a renewed chapter for to be scripted in the history, given the fact that 35 years ago, the bitter chapter relating to India pulling out the IPKF from the island nation then takes a new turn. What are your thoughts?
Simran, defense cooperation between Sri Lanka and India will be a natural offshoot of growing friendship between both the countries. As far as India is concerned, we are dedicated to provide any kind of assistance that Sri Lankan Army, Navy, or Air Force needs from India. Joint training of officers, wherein we exchange Sri Lankan officers come to India for training, and similarly, Indian officers go to Sri Lanka for training. This scope has to be enhanced. Sri Lanka is strategically located in the middle of Indian Ocean. From Sri Lanka, one can keep an eye very easily on Bay of Bengal, on Arabian Sea, and down south, almost up to Australian coasts. So India will definitely like to share some intelligence with Sri Lanka. As far as defense cooperation is concerned, India has extended supplies. We have promised Sri Lanka that in case it wishes to procure any defense equipment from India, maybe a helicopter, maybe a transport or attack aircraft like Tejas, India is willing to offer such facilities to Sri Lanka. Indian Army also has offered training to Sri Lankan Army, Commando, and Special Forces so that they can combat any internal disturbances in Sri Lanka. It remains to be seen whether the cooperation between defense forces will extend to sharing of sensitive information regarding waters around Sri Lanka. What is happening? Chinese ships, Chinese spy ships, Chinese survey ships, they continuously monitor the waters, the depth of water, salinity, and availability of minerals in international seas. This probably is a ploy by Chinese spy ships and survey ships to gather intelligence so that in case there is a skirmish between India and China, Chinese submarines will have an advantage. So
All right,
India
Group Captain UK Devnath. Thank you very much for in fact adding these details. Now I also have my colleague Megha Sharma joining me live from Colombo. This is a big visit. In fact, Megha, as we are speaking, to offset China, and in the times when China's growing influence on Sri Lanka is being talked about, this visit sets a precedent, also enhances the relations between the world leaders and paves the way forward for what remains to be next in the India-Sri Lanka ties. As a big cultural show and grand ceremonial welcome has been accorded to Prime Minister Narendra Modi, what can be looked forward to next?
Are you able to hear me? Are you able to hear me, Simran?
Yes, I'm able to hear you.
Yeah, so here you take a look at the visuals on your screens. The cavalcades of Prime Minister Narendra Modi and President Dissanayaka have now departed from the Independence Square in Colombo. From the Independence Square in Colombo, the Prime Minister and the President are headed now to the Presidential Secretariat, which is a very short drive. Just in with few minutes time, both the leaders of the states are going to be arriving at the presidential secretariat. At the secretariat is where it is going to be the start of the restricted bilateral talks between both the leaders, and that is going to be the big emphasis, the big highlight of this entire 3-day visit, during which there are going to be talks that are going to be held with regards to the MOUs that are to be signed, what is going to be the future road ahead for Sri Lanka and for And for India, in terms of energy, infrastructure, auto industry that is, setting itself as a huge footprint in Sri Lanka. We also saw just very recently, weeks ago, that there were these. The Tata Motors released a number of its EVs in direct competition to the Chinese EVs that have made a stronghold in the country of Sri Lanka. So that is something that is going to be an interesting watch that we'll continue to keeping in mind that it is at the end of the day the press statements that is released and the MOUs that are signed and what are going to be the details of it that are going to be written, be read. The fine print will have to be read to understand how it all works out for both the countries. And here you take a look now, the cavalcades of all the other ministers. The foreign minister of our country, S. Jaishankar, is already departed, and there's the foreign minister of Sri Lanka. That's foreign minister of our country, Mr. S. Jaishankar, who's now stepping inside his car. We also see that the other ministers and the officials and bureaucrats who are accompanying them have also now taken their seats in their respective cars. They will all now be headed to the presidential secretariat. Simran, I will keep you updated on these developments. In the meantime, we ourselves are headed to the presidential secretariat right now.
Well, absolutely. In fact, as my colleague Megha Sharma is bringing us these live visuals and also showing us the kind of view that Prime Minister Narendra Modi, after landing in Colombo, has witnessed while the grand ceremonial welcome from Prime Minister Narendra Modi in the first ever visit to Sri Lanka, live from Colombo, ahead of holding the bilateral talks with the Sri Lankan President Anura Kumar Dissanayake, is going to happen. All eyes are on the key agreements that will also take place and the kind of joint declarations that could be made. Colonel J.S. Sodhi is also with me live on the broadcast. Sir, appreciate your patience. Now, in the times when China is expanding its influence across the Indian Ocean, specifically focusing on the areas of strategic Indian importance, how do you look this crucial visit? Right now, Sri Lanka, which has granted the permission for the Chinese vessels to dock at the Hambantota for the replenishment purposes. This is in fact being given as a fact of the matter for a big signal to China. How do you look at it?
And Simran, it's my honor to be on an esteemed channel and a privilege to be with the esteemed co-panelist. Well, Simran, this visit of Prime Minister Modi to Sri Lanka comes at a very apt and appropriate time as the tensions and turbulence in the Indo-Pacific region are increasing with each passing day. In fact, as of last night, the US military has deployed 3 aircraft carrier groups in the Indo-Pacific region, 1 in the South China Sea and 2 near Diego Garcia and near the Middle East. The fact remains that now even US is aware that China has got very aggressive and assertive military designs, and Prime Minister Modi's visit to Sri Lanka couldn't have come at a much better time, because now is the time for India to have more outreach with all its neighbors, because the war clouds on India are getting darkening with each passing day. In fact, last month on 17th March, General Upendra Dwivedi, the Chief of Army Staff of the Indian Army, said in a statement that a two-front war on India is no longer a possibility, it is a reality. And in these realistic times, the more close India has good relations with its neighbors, the better it will be on us when the D-Day comes, when these two neighbors of ours launch wars on us. Well, the fact remains that the way Prime Minister Modi has attended the BIMSTEC meet in Thailand, where he's met every head of state there, and now the Sri Lanka visit, well, this is a perfect opportune moment for India to once again have very good relations with its neighbors. We have seen in the past, China has made a lot of inroads, but then, like they say, it is never too late. India is getting back at having good friendly terms with all its neighbors.
Well, definitely, in fact, at this point of time, how my guests are also giving the highlight of what remains to be at the center stage. Now, let's also take a close look as to what the Indian funded projects in Sri Lanka are and the importance and significance that they carry from the purpose that India has in fact invested in the island nation. $61.5 million grant was given and sanctioned to develop the Kankestan Turai port in Sri Lanka. And in fact, when we talk about pushing the economical development further, the economic land corridor to develop the land access to the three Connemara and Colombo was also given. These are the big projects, viewers, that we are putting out. Apart from that, $600 million for the development of 25 districts in Sri Lanka was also given. These are the Indian backed, Indian funded projects that have been sanctioned in Sri Lanka for development and economical purposes. Construction of 60,000 houses in the 4 phases of the Indian housing projects at the cost of over 1800 crore rupees has been made. Apart from many economical in fact projects, the construction of houses is one of them. Now, 300 crore rupees grant assistance to implement Sri Lanka unique digital identity project has also been sanctioned. This is going to be one of the very monumental and in fact a crucial point in the history of Sri Lanka that is going to revolutionize and how they make the payments as well. Now, the culture center at Jaffna is also what is the Indian funded projects in Sri Lanka look like. The upgradation of the Northern Railway line and track laying is yet another. How exactly the rail networks are enhanced and what is the need, and to understand exactly from where the best trade practices can also be invested into. India has also invested in the rail networks to enhance the trade and the connectivity sector. The island-wide Suva Syria emergency ambulance services have also been one of the good examples of how Indian funded projects in Sri Lanka are faring. Now, the new surgical unit at a teaching hospital, Batalika, is what also has come up in one of the latest projects by India in Sri Lanka. The another one is the restoration of the Tirukesthi temple at Munnar here in Sri Lanka, and the restoration was also carried out at the expense of the Indian funds. Now, the solar electrification of the Buddhist places of worship, also pushing the narrative forward of going clean and green as both the neighboring nations focus on a shared vision. Now, the hybrid renewable energy projects in 31 islands of Jaffna is also another Indian funded projects in Sri Lanka that look like. Well, there are enough of in fact these projects which have added to the development, the welfare and the economic growth of Sri Lanka. Group Captain UK Devnath, as we continue to discuss the merits of this crucial bilateral talk, how exactly do you see India having in fact played its role and ability to grant Sri Lanka also cope through that period of 2022 where there have been financial and gross economic loss to the island nation as well?
Yes, Simran, Sri Lanka is relatively a very small country. Exports and imports trade with China and with USA are not very favorable. Under the circumstances, India always takes initiative and helps out Sri Lanka. A great reason is that India and Sri Lanka have a shared mutually shared history of more than 2000 years old. There are small issues which during this visit probably will be ironed out. One of the issues with Sri Lanka is Kachativu. Kachativu is exactly between Sri Lanka and India. The waters are very shallow. Our tradesmen, our fishermen regularly go there for fishing. Uh, uh, in good old days, India had handed over Kachativu to Sri Lanka. But there is a lot of pressure from Tamilians in Tamil Nadu that India should claim back Kachativu. Let's see how Pradhan Mantri Modi ji uses his special skills to convince Sri Lanka on this issue. Arrest of Indian fishermen by Sri Lankan navies is a very, very delicate and sensitive issue. Last year, you see, the Pak state, which divides India and Sri Lanka, is a very narrow. Sometimes it is just about 22 or 25-kilometer wide. Coral reefs are there. The shallow water encourages fisheries. Indian fishermen very often go there in the absence of any accurate navigation charts. Very often, Indian fishermen probably stray into Sri Lankan waters. That time, as per mutual agreement, they are supposed to be warned and then let off. But last year, Sri Lanka arrested more than 500 Indian fishermen and kept them in their jails for some time before Indian External Affairs Ministry could intervene and get them released. One of the very, very sensitive issue between India and Sri Lanka is Sri Lanka providing logistics support to Pakistan Navy ships when they travel to Bangladesh and when Pakistan Navy ships go back from Bangladesh to Pakistan. India will definitely like to discourage this trend, but it remains to be seen how our External Affairs Ministry or Defense Ministry negotiates and gives a hint to Sri Lanka that probably they can avoid visit of Pakistani ships to Sri Lankan naval ports. Simran, as the trade between both the countries flourishes, it will be good for Sri Lanka and India. Our trade with Sri Lanka is almost touching $6 billion, which is a healthy sum. It remains favorable to India. India exports about 4 billion worth of goods and services to Sri Lanka. Sri Lanka exports about 1.5 billion worth of goods and services to India. So it is a win-win situation both the countries. Modi ji's visit should soften the irritants which are there between Sri Lanka and India. We would like Sri Lanka to remain a good friend. We will like Sri Lanka not to get influenced too much by Chinese. Chinese are also very clever. They are giving big loans to Sri Lanka, and they are giving these loans to Sri Lanka at a terms and conditions which Sri Lankan government sometimes cannot refuse. Only way for India is to give competitive offers to Sri Lanka at a much more favorable rates. Technical cooperation between both the countries remain very strong point. Large number of our technocrats are working in Sri Lanka, both in private sector as well as from government. Various PSUs and PSEs of India are very keen to provide technical services to Sri Lankan government services. Let's see how Modi ji plays his card. It is going to be very, very interesting and challenging 3 days in Sri Lanka for Modi ji.
Well, absolutely.
Yes,
In
Simran?
fact, Group Captain UK Devnath, thank you very much for putting out these details in context for our viewers. Now, in fact, viewers, let me also share some important facts with you about concerning these visit and specifically this crucial time. Though the JVP has been long known for its historic anti-India stand, the Indian side has made an outreach to Desayanke earlier last year, inviting him to New Delhi months before the election. Now, the courting of the JPV leader has paid off the Indian government when Desayanke has made New Delhi his first port to call last December after becoming the president, and gave Prime Minister Narendra Modi an assurance that Sri Lanka wouldn't allow its soil to be used against the Indian interest. Now, that is where exactly the strengthening and the enhancing of the bilateral nations lie at. More significantly, this crucial visit is also circling around how this is scripted as a new era of strengthening relations given a troubled history also that both the nations had shared. The agreement is also going to help turn the page on India's troubled intervention in Sri Lanka's civil war in the form of the Indian Peacekeeping Force, that's the IPKF, that was deployed in the island nation between July 1987 and March 1990. The PM is also going to visit the IPKF Memorial in Colombo on Saturday to now pay the tribute to the 1,155 Indian soldiers that were killed in Sri Lanka. All right, Major General Sudhakar Ji is with me live on the broadcast. Appreciate you joining me this morning. Thank you very much for being with us. And as we are in fact going deep into what exactly lies behind this crucial and significant visit, Major General Sudhakar Ji, as I've just shared some details over the kind of past that India has shared with Sri Lanka, given also the kind of contribution during the civil war. What are your thoughts on to how exactly this visit at this point of time when India is heavily investing in Sri Lanka as well, just few years after Sri Lanka crippled due to the financial economic losses in the year 2022. Right now, is this a good time for the India and Sri Lanka to enhance their strategic ties in the view of how China is expanding their influence over the Indian Ocean?
Good morning, Simran. It's a great delight to connect with NewsX when you are the anchor, and one learns a lot from what you cover. A very important question you have raised. All I would say is that nobody can stop China in expanding their dominance in the footprint in Indian Ocean or elsewhere in the world, because it has grown. We have given everything on a platter, outsourced the production of virtually almost everything to China, made it the manufacturing hub of the world for 40 years. Now, to decouple, de-risk, these are all semantics. I'm giving a very practical reflection of my thought. So China will come. China will be present in Sri Lanka. They will invest money despite the outreach we have extended. Fortunately, I would say in the growth story of India's destiny, a turning point came wherein Sri Lanka was crippled, and we gave 4 billion or maybe more than that to take it out from the debt trap. Otherwise, the country, the sovereign debt was coming into place. The country would have defaulted in a very serious manner. So we have managed to rescue, but still then, the party issue that you mentioned, JVP, you see, nothing is permanent. The attraction for which they have got the leanings onto China, same attraction again is going to actually multiply and put Sri Lanka in the debt trap. So let's leave it at that. May that not occur the way I am stating. But the basic issue is Sri Lanka is a country which is in the backyard, around 64 to 137 kilometers away from the coastline of the southern India. There is an island, Kathavichu. I personally feel, it is my take, in 1974, we Indians are very gullible, most of us. We tend to, we have no long-term vision, no long-term perspective plan. For whatever may have been the reason, this particular island should not have been given. If I share with you certain things, it will be very alarming. People will say, no, the general is talking through his hat. China is going all out to have its footprint and presence in Kathavichu Island. This is the island where we have large number of our fishermen going off and on, because this used to be part of India, and it was given on a platter in 1974 for whatever understanding. I'm not contesting that. But this is definitely an issue if it can be resolved. I don't think it can be resolved. It cannot be taken back from Sri Lanka, but there is no harm in trying for it. But second most important issue is that it is at the Hambantota port, which was offered to India. Initially, we declined way back in 90s. Then China took it on, 99 years of lease. Fortunately, there is an airport around 18 to 20 kilometers. I have been to this airport myself when I was dealing with the immediate neighborhood in service. And fortunately, as per my understanding and from open sources, the airport has been taken by us just to keep an eye as to what activity China is doing at Hambantota. It's very, very important. We need to actually creep in a not encroaching incrementally, penetrate into the system of Sri Lanka, make our presence formidable, and we cannot actually, displace or throw out China. China is there to stay for whatever reason, but we should be able to counter it effectively so that it doesn't spy on our all activities in the southern India and come start influencing. The technology China, which is enjoying today, the technology can be used to subvert the minds of the people. 6G warfare, their minds set will take another 20, 30 years to catch up with them. So therefore, your mobile communication, your like it has happened in the northern border. So now that Indian government is woken up, it will do good to remain aware of these kind of turning points. China will be a threat from all sides. It will encircle, it is the carried out the strategic encirclement, Indian Ocean particularly, between, let's say, Sri Lanka, Maldives, Mauritius, such like places. Earlier, there used to be one odd ship coming prior to 2012-13. Now there are, every month, there are 7 to 8 ships. These are frigates. There are submarines, used to be one once a while or so. There are 3 submarines which are underwater today. There are spy ships which non-existent earlier. There are 3 of them ships which are actually in the Indian Ocean region. When I say Indian Ocean, between the east coast of Africa to, let's say, the west coast of Australia. This is the stretch and extent of Indian Ocean. And in times ahead, the presence of all these subsurface vessels are going to increase. And more than that, Simran, is very alarming. The civil-military fusion which is taking place in China, it has started manifesting in our Indian Ocean region. Talk about Maldives. Out of the exclusive economic zone is 200 kilometers from the coastline. Okay, beyond that, they have got large number of vessels which are carrying out fishing. And Mauritius, Oman, and Hambantota from Sri Lanka's exclusive economic zone, there are a large number. The last count I had, I was giving a lecture somewhere in a global platform. The count was coming to 260 fishing vessels, which has got representatives of PLA, which has got naval people, plan people. Why have they come here for fishing? Do they have? They are carrying out hydrographic survey for the submarines to actually navigate this area, dominate Indian Ocean region, so that the strategic encirclement which they have done to large an extent in Pakistan, they are penetrating into Nepal, they are helping. Despite all resistance from Bhutanese government, Bangladesh, you know the situation. Myanmar, we know there is a strategic rivalry between USA and China. Sri Lanka is the hub. I would say, it is the turning point of Indian Ocean, which will enable India to exercise its dominance and also contain and counter any adversarial or forces inimical to national interest of India. Because everything along the east coast, we have almost all the large number of our research centers of Navy and strategic forces.
Well, all right, Major General Sudhakarji, thank you very much for giving so much context and also adding, in fact, significance to what exactly the emphasis on strengthening the relations and the bilateral ties between the two nations, especially given at this point of time, during the visit by Prime Minister Narendra Modi looks like. I also have Deepak Vora, sir, joining me live on the broadcast for the same, who's a former diplomat. Appreciate you joining me this morning. Now, as we are categorically looking at the significance of this crucial visit, briefly I would like to understand from you the kind of emphasis that will also be put into the investments in Sri Lanka. Now we already understand that a lot has been invested in Sri Lanka, and the Indian High Commissioner Santosh Jha has also given statements as to a lot has been already being invested in rail networks, in electricity, in defense and in trade in Sri Lanka. But when we talk about the new solar energy plants and the Sampur solar energy power, that will be the new thing. How are you looking forward to that? Briefly.
Thank you very much, ma'am. Always a pleasure to be with you. I'm talking to you from my mobile phone since I'm in the swimming pool. I'm glad that you are not able to see me. Now, ma'am, the reason for this visit, it's a 3-day state visit, as you know. And did you notice that he got a 21-gun salute, which is normally reserved for heads of state? He's a head of government. The entire cabinet showed up to receive him. And 40 years ago, I recall, when he was inspecting the Guard of Honor, the then Prime Minister Rajiv Gandhi, a Sri Lankan sailor attacked him. Of course, nothing like that will ever happen again. Now, what do the Sri Lankans want? What is their priority? All this about strategic encirclement of India, I've been hearing for 5,000 years. Nothing is going to happen about that. China doesn't have the capacity. If they did, they would have taken Taiwan long ago. What does Sri Lanka want today? Ma'am, the first priority is food. When I last went there about 3 years ago, one of my batchmates from the National Defense College 1991, very senior chap, he said, looking forward to your visit, Ambassador, can you bring some rice and dal? Don't you think my heart bleeds? When I heard this kind of thing, he wanted it for his grandkids, etc. It just wasn't available in the market. So food will be their first priority. The second will be energy. And third, for revival of their economy, they would be looking for investment in manufacturing. Who can give that to them without any, without looking over one shoulder, without any vested self-interest? Of course, for us, a swarth to har relationship mein hota hai. But the one country that has earned the trust of the world, you've probably heard the name of that country, it's called China. I beg your pardon, Bharat, I was joking. And one country that no one trusts is called China, and now I'm not joking. So the idea here is that he's going for this visit. Defense will be a major component. Agriculture will be another thing. Investment, manufacturing, etc. Our lines of credit which we have given. And we have rolled over the debt. China did not do it. China keeps everything secret. The IMF also said, guys, tell us how much do you owe the Chinese. Oh, sorry, we can't tell you because the Chinese will beat us up. So looking at the totality of the relationship, Sri Lanka is very important for us. We are even more important for them. If they want to prevent themselves from being gobbled up by that big bad bully, well, then we are standing like the Rock of Gibraltar.
All right,
Mr.
Mr. Vora, always a pleasure listening to you, and thank you very much for giving us all these details and putting this in complete comprehension to all my other guests, Group Captain UK Devnath, Major General Sudhakar Ji as well. Thank you very much for staying with me on the broadcast.
For more such videos, subscribe to the NewsX YouTube channel, hit the bell icon.